I still remember the sound of that knock. 3 gentle taps against the front door, just as the evening light turned gold. My husband had gone upstairs to rest. His footsteps had faded. The house had gone still. I thought the night would be quiet. But then, the knock came again. I hesitated. We weren't expecting anyone. Our little street rarely saw visitors after dark. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door halfway. "Hi, Mrs. Harper." It was Emily and Ben, the kids from next door. They were only teenagers, both smiling shyly under the porch light, holding a small tray of muffins. "My mom said we baked too many," Emily said. "She thought you might want some." Her words were simple, but something in her eyes told me this visit wasn't just about muffins. I smiled, trying to mask my surprise. "That's very sweet. Come in for a minute. It's chilly out." They stepped inside carefully, like they weren't sure they should. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around us. I made tea, the kettle's whistle cutting through the silence. The clock ticked louder than usual. Upstairs, I could hear the faint hum of my husband's snoring. A reminder that this house, for years, had been too quiet. We sat at the table. Emily looked at the family photos on the wall, the wedding picture, the trips we once took. "You and Mr. Harper look so happy there," she said softly. "We were," I replied before realizing how heavy that sounded. "We still are, just life gets busy." Ben nodded. "My parents are like that too. They barely talk anymore." His honesty startled me. His eyes were kind, open, and far too wise for his age. For a moment, none of us spoke. The house felt alive again. Not loud, but full in a way it hadn't been in a long time. We talked about simple things. Movies, books, the smell of rain. Emily laughed easily. Ben listened more than he spoke. I found myself smiling without effort. It felt strange and peaceful. Then the power flickered. The lights dimmed, and for a second, the only sound was the rain tapping on the window. I reached for the candle on the counter and lit it. The soft glow filled the room, and their faces looked different in the light. Calm, safe, almost comforting. "Looks like the storm's coming," I said. Ben glanced outside. "We should probably go soon." But the rain began to fall harder, and thunder rolled in the distance. "You can wait it out," I said, gesturing toward the living room. "No sense running home in this." They exchanged a look, hesitant but relieved. I handed them blankets, and we sat near the big window, watching the rain dance on the glass. Emily leaned her head on her arm. "I like storms," she said quietly. "They make everything else stop for a while." I nodded. "Yes, like the world finally slows down." For the next half hour, we just talked. About nothing and everything. About how people change. How dreams shift. How sometimes silence becomes heavier than words. I didn't realize how much I needed that to be heard. To simply exist with someone without expectations. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. I froze. Ben looked up. "Is he awake?" I shook my head. "No. He moves a lot in his sleep." But my heart was racing. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Guilt, maybe. Or the realization that I had begun to feel alive again, and I didn't know what to do with that. Emily broke the silence. "You're easy to talk to, Mrs. Harper. My mom, she's always in a rush." "You listen." Her words caught me off guard. "Well," I said softly, "sometimes all someone needs is to be listened to." When the storm finally softened, they stood to leave. I walked them to the door. The air smelled like wet grass and clean earth. "Thank you," Ben said, holding the tray I'd filled with the rest of the muffins. "For the tea, and for just talking." "Any time," I said, meaning it more than I expected. They stepped into the night, their laughter fading as they ran across the yard. I stood in the doorway a while longer, feeling the echo of their voices linger in the air. When I turned around, I noticed something small and glimmering on the floor. A silver bracelet. Emily's, I guessed. I bent down and picked it up. The initials on it weren't hers. It read, "To be always." I frowned. B for Ben. Always. I looked toward the stairs. The soft hum of my husband's snoring filled the house again. But something about that bracelet, that tiny, misplaced secret, made my heart beat faster. I turned off the light and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow I'll ask." But deep down, I already knew. Tomorrow wouldn't be as quiet as tonight. The next morning, the silver bracelet still sat on the counter, catching the light like a tiny mirror. I kept glancing at it as I made coffee, wondering why it felt heavier than it should. To be always. The engraving looped in soft cursive, the kind you'd expect on a gift meant to last forever. When I finally saw Emily later that day, she was watering her mother's roses. "Did you lose this?" I asked, holding it up. Her eyes widened. "Oh, I thought I lost it ages ago," she said, taking it gently from my hand. "It's not mine, though. It was my mom's." I paused. "Your mom's?" She nodded. "She used to say it was a gift from someone special. I think she gave it to Ben recently, but I'm not sure why." Something flickered in my chest. A strange mix of curiosity and recognition. That name Ben had been echoing in my thoughts all morning. And now, hearing that the bracelet belonged to his mother made the air feel a little heavier. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch, sipping tea as the neighborhood settled into its quiet rhythm. My mind wandered back to the time before this street. Before this version of my life. It was spring. Nearly 15 years ago. I was standing in the same kind of sunlight, wearing a borrowed jacket and holding a camera that didn't quite work. I was in my first teaching job, nervous but excited. That's when I met him, Daniel Harper, the man who would become my husband. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd come to fix a broken window in my classroom. "You're the new teacher?" he asked, smiling, wiping dust from his hands. "Yes," I said. "And you're the hero saving the first graders from a draft." He laughed, a quiet, steady laugh that made people feel safe. And for a long time, that's what he was for me. Safety. Our life began with small gestures, coffee cups left on desks, notes tucked into lunch bags, long walks where words didn't need to fill the silence. He was solid, reliable kind. We built a home on those things. But somewhere between work deadlines and years slipping by, the laughter thinned out. I didn't notice it leaving. It just faded quietly, like a song you forget you used to love. And then years later, I met Ben. It was at the community center, one of those volunteer days when everyone showed up half-heartedly but left with full hearts. He'd been organizing supplies, sleeves rolled up, hair a mess. "Do you know how to fix this?" I asked, holding up a tangled string of lights. He smiled, easy and confident. "I'm good at untangling things." And somehow, in that single line, a connection was born. We started working side by side, laughing over spilled paint and burnt cookies from the bake sale. I told him stories about my students. He told me about his dreams of studying architecture. There was no boundary crossed, just a quiet understanding, a warmth that felt new. He reminded me of who I'd been before everything got so still. Then one day, he stopped showing up. At first, I thought he was just busy. But when weeks passed, I asked around. Someone said he'd moved away suddenly with his mother. No goodbye, no reason. Just gone. I didn't realize until much later that I'd carried that silence with me. Every time the house went quiet, every time the rain hit the window, I wondered what had happened to him. And now, all these years later, a bracelet had found its way into my kitchen engraved with words that didn't belong to a stranger. That evening, when Ben and Emily stopped by again, I couldn't stop myself from looking closer. He looked older now, of course more grown, more thoughtful. But there was something in the way he smiled that tugged at an old memory. "Ben," I said softly, "did your mom ever live near Maplewood Avenue?" He blinked, surprised. "Yeah. Before she got married, we lived there for a while." "How do you know that?" I felt my breath catch. Maplewood Avenue, that was where the community center had been. The one where I'd met him all those years ago. "You helped me with Christmas lights once," I said slowly, watching his face for a sign. "You said you were good at untangling things." His eyes widened, and then softened with recognition. "That was you." I nodded, a quiet ache rising in my chest. "You were just a boy then." He smiled faintly. "You remembered." We stood there in silence, the air suddenly thick with something unnamed. Emily looked between us, puzzled. "Wait, you two know each other?" Ben turned to her, then back to me. "I guess we do. But I never knew your last name." A soft breeze passed between us, carrying the faint smell of rain. For a moment the years folded in on themselves. That night, after they left, I found myself looking at the bracelet again. Something about it still didn't add up. I turned it over, running my thumb along the engraving. And then I saw it, faint but clear beneath the silver glare. A second line, almost worn away. "To be, always. Love. D. Daniel." My husband's name. The bracelet slipped from my fingers. Clinking softly against the counter, my heart raced. There was no reason for it to be in Ben's family. And yet, it was. The past, it seemed, hadn't stayed buried. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the engraving. The bracelet sat beside my coffee cup, silver glint catching the light like it was trying to say something. To be, always. Love, D. Daniel Harper. My husband. The words felt strange in my chest. He wasn't the kind of man who kept secrets. He fixed broken chairs, watered the plants, and kept his promises. But this didn't make sense. When Ben showed up at the door that afternoon, holding a folder of school forms for his sister, I felt the air shift. He was smiling, polite, completely unaware that the ground beneath us had quietly cracked. "Come in," I said, my voice softer than I intended. He stepped inside, his hair still damp from the rain. There was a nervousness in the way he stood, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I didn't mean to drop that bracelet here," he said quickly. "Emily told me you found it." I nodded, eyes still on him. "It's beautiful. Your mother must have loved it." "She did," he said. "Said it was from someone who changed her life once." I felt something twist inside me. "Did she ever tell you his name?" He hesitated. "She said his name was Daniel." The room went quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain sliding down the window. Ben noticed my stillness. "Is something wrong?" I shook my head slowly, trying to find words. "No, I just knew someone by that name too." He gave a small, awkward laugh. "It's a common name, I guess." "Maybe," I said. But my heart didn't believe it. We stood there, caught between the past and the present, between politeness and something far heavier. Finally, I gestured to the couch. "Sit down, Ben. You look like you've been running in the rain all morning." He smiled faintly and sat, resting his folder beside him. I poured him some tea, hands trembling slightly. He glanced at the photos on the wall again. "You and your husband. You've been together a long time." "Almost 15 years, I said, my voice low. "We met at a school where I used to teach." "That's amazing," he said. "You can tell." There's something steady in the way you talk about him. I wanted to smile at that, but I couldn't. Steady, I repeated. Yes, that's the word for him. There was a pause. The kind that stretches too long, heavy with what isn't said. Then Ben's tone softened. You know, when I was younger, I didn't really understand love. My mom used to tell me it's not about fireworks. It's about someone who stays even when things stop shining. I looked at him. She was a wise woman. She was lonely, he said quietly. But she never said it out loud. I just knew. He stared at the window, his reflection faint in the glass. After she died, I found some old letters. I never read them all. Just the last one. It was from someone she used to know. Someone she never stopped caring about. My breath caught. Letters? He nodded. Yeah. I don't know who he was, but she kept one picture in a box with that bracelet. It was an old photo, kind of faded. A man standing near a school building. A chill went down my spine. Do you still have it? Ben reached into his folder, surprising me. Actually, yeah. I brought it to show Emily's teacher today. I didn't think it mattered. He pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table. I hesitated before touching it. The paper was yellowed at the edges. I turned it over. My heart stopped. It was Daniel. My Daniel. Younger, smiling, standing next to a broken classroom window. The same one I remembered from the day we met. My fingers trembled. Where did she get this? Ben looked confused. I told you. It was my mom's. She said the man in the picture once helped her when her life was falling apart. I guess she never told me more, because she didn't want me to think less of her. I set the picture down carefully, my pulse racing. Daniel had been in that town years before he met me, working as a contractor, fixing things, helping schools. What if their paths had crossed before mine? What if I was the second beginning? To his story, not the first. Ben must have noticed the shift in my face. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. Yes, just surprised. He leaned forward, sincerity written all over his face. I didn't mean to bring up anything painful. I just thought you'd want to see it. You seemed connected to things. I met his eyes. The same soft, understanding look I'd seen years ago at that community center. The same kindness that had quietly pulled me out of my silence. Thank you, I said softly. You did the right thing. He smiled, relieved. I'm glad. But as he stood to leave, something made me stop him. Ben, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What was your mom's name? He turned at the doorway. Clara. The name hit like a ripple. Clara, the woman Daniel once mentioned when we first married. A friend who helped me start over, he'd said back then, before we had even bought this house. I smiled faintly, holding back the rush of questions. She sounds like she was a good person. He nodded. She was. She always said. Some people enter your life to remind you who used to be. The words lingered as he stepped into the rain and disappeared down the street. I looked at the photo one last time, tracing Daniel's face with my fingertips. And that's when I noticed the faint handwriting on the back. Faded, but there it read, For Clara and her boy, may your hearts find peace. D.H. I felt my knees weaken. Daniel hadn't just known them. He'd loved them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel's breathing was steady beside me, calm, unaware. The photo lay on the nightstand, half hidden beneath the lamp. His younger face stared back at me, smiling, effortless, real. I turned it over again, tracing the words written on the back. For Clara and her boy, may your hearts find peace. D.H. Peace. He had written that once before he even met me. Before our story began, I sat up. The rain outside had stopped, but the air still smelled like thunder. The clock glowed 12:47 a.m. For a moment, I thought about putting the photo away, pretending I never saw it. But the truth had already stepped into the room. And it wasn't leaving. By morning, I made up my mind. Daniel was reading the paper at the table when I came downstairs. Coffee steaming, quiet house, ordinary day. I placed the photograph beside his mug. He looked at it, then at me. His brow furrowed, not with fear, but with recognition. He didn't ask where I got it. He didn't even touch it. I spoke first. Her name was Clara. His fingers tightened on the cup. The sound of ceramic meeting wood was the only sound between us. Yes, he said finally. His voice low. It was a long time ago. I nodded. I know. Silence again. The kind that bends the air. She had a son, I said. Ben. He closed his eyes for a second, as if the name carried weight. I know, he whispered. My chest ached. So it's true. He looked up. You found them? They lived next door, I said. They've been here for months. Daniel's face went pale. He didn't move. Didn't breathe for a moment. Then he whispered, almost to himself, after all these years. I sat down across from him. My hands were cold. I need to know, Daniel. Not as your wife. As someone who deserves the truth. He nodded, still looking at the photo. She was the first person who believed in me, he said quietly. Back when I had nothing. No work. No direction. I fixed her windows one afternoon. She made me tea. I stayed longer than I should have. He smiled faintly, but it faded fast. We never planned it. It was just kindness that became something more. My heart sank. You loved her. I thought I did, he said. But we were both lost. She had a little boy, Ben. He was just a kid. I used to take him to the park, fix his bike. For a while, I thought I could be part of their life. He paused, eyes distant. Then one day, she told me her husband was coming back. He'd been gone for months, working out of town. She said I couldn't stay. His voice cracked, not with guilt, but with memory. I left that night. I didn't even say goodbye to the boy. I thought walking away was the right thing. The kitchen felt smaller, the air heavier. And the bracelet? I asked. He looked at me, pain flickering behind his eyes. I gave it to her. She said she'd keep it so I wouldn't forget the good we shared. I never knew she passed it to her son. I nodded slowly, feeling something quiet break inside me. I met her son before I knew who he was, I said. He's kind, Daniel. He reminds me of you. He smiled sadly. Then she raised him well. We sat there, both silent, both thinking of different versions of the same woman. For years I believed I was his beginning, but now I saw I was the peace he found after the storm, not the storm itself. Finally I asked, why didn't you tell me? He exhaled, steady, because it wasn't about us. I thought that chapter was closed. But maybe some things don't close. They just wait. The clock ticked. Outside, the morning light was soft gold, too gentle for truths like this. I whispered, Ben doesn't know. He just found the picture. Daniel's jaw tightened. He shouldn't have to know. That story ended a long time ago. I met his eyes. Did it? He didn't answer. He just looked away, not with guilt, but with the weight of someone realizing the past never stays buried. After a long silence, he said quietly, maybe it's time I see him. The words hit me like cold water. I stood, unsure what to feel. Relief, fear, something in between. You want to see him? Daniel nodded slowly. If she's gone and he's here, I owe him at least that much. I turned toward the window, watching the soft drizzle return. My reflection looked older, thinner, but strangely lighter too. Then I'll tell him, I said. Daniel stood behind me, his hand brushing my shoulder. Thank you. I didn't turn around. Don't thank me yet. He left for work soon after, but his shadow stayed in the house, in every corner, every quiet creak. I picked up the bracelet again, running my thumb over the engraving. To be always. Always. That word didn't belong to me. It belonged to a woman I never met and a boy who had unknowingly walked back into our lives. Outside, I saw Ben and Emily heading down the street, laughing in the drizzle. And for the first time, I realized the next step wouldn't belong to Daniel. It would belong to me. I took the bracelet, slipped it into my coat pocket, and opened the door. The sky was grey, soft, endless, and I whispered to myself, it's time to find out what always really means. I stood in the quiet living room, my hands still trembling from what I had just heard. The truth hung between us like the echo of a bell. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to erase. Ethan sat across from me, his eyes soft but tired, the years of silence finally catching up to both of us. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said gently, his voice low. When I left, I thought you deserved peace. I didn't want to disturb what you'd built. Peace. That word felt strange now. I had built a life, yes. A good man upstairs who cared for me. A quiet home. Everything that should have meant contentment. But in all those years, peace had felt like still water. Calm, but without reflection. I never wanted you to disappear, I whispered. Not like that. I just needed time. You didn't even give me a goodbye. He nodded slowly. I couldn't. I was scared you'd ask me to stay. The air felt heavy. Outside, dawn had begun to show. Pale light pressing against the curtains. It reminded me of another morning, long ago, when I had watched him leave through the same kind of light, carrying the same kind of guilt. For a while, we sat in silence. Two people who once shared everything now sitting in the ruins of words unsaid. Then Ethan stood up. You should go upstairs, he said softly. He'll wake up soon. The way he said it, without bitterness, without any claim, made something ache in my chest. I wanted to say something that would make sense of all of this, but nothing did. Instead, I looked at him and said, Do you ever think about what might have been? He smiled faintly. Every time I hear the rain. I didn't know why that broke me. Maybe because it had started to rain that night, too. The night years ago when we realized timing had its own cruel rhythm. I stepped closer, not to touch him, but just to look at him properly one last time. The man I once loved. The friend I never stopped missing. The person who knew me before life got quiet. Thank you, I said, for telling me the truth. He nodded once. You deserved it. Then, without another word, he walked out into the rain. I didn't stop him. When I finally went upstairs, my husband was still asleep, his breathing steady and peaceful. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart caught somewhere between past and present. And that's when I noticed something on the windowsill, a folded piece of paper, slightly wet from the rain that had slipped in through the open window. My name was written on it in familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't long, just a few lines. You once told me that love isn't about staying. It's about remembering. So, if you ever hear the rain, know that I'm remembering too. No signature. No promises. Just quiet understanding. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel torn. I felt whole. Not because I chose between them, but because I finally chose peace. When the morning light grew stronger, I placed the letter inside the old music box on my dresser, the one that had been silent for years. I turned the tiny key, and the soft tune filled the room. Wrapping around me like a whisper dot, my husband stirred and opened his eyes. "You're up early," he murmured. I smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep." He reached for my hand, half awake. "Everything okay?" I looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the earth still shimmered with what it left behind. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Everything's finally okay." As the music box played its final note, I realized something simple yet true. Love doesn't always stay, but it always leaves something behind. Sometimes it's a letter. Sometimes it's a memory dot, and sometimes it's the rain.